If you're anything like me, the chances are when you first picked up a barbell and started training in the gym to improve your performance for rugby, you were told and believed the lie that maximal strength is the number one thing to train for. The strongest are the best. If you can just push up those numbers, everything's going to be okay. Not the case, but of course there is value and utility to maximal strength. When you look at the physics of sport at the most basic level, it's all about movement. And we know from the laws of physics that if you want to create movement and you want to get somewhere quicker, you have to produce more force. And it kind of makes sense because obviously maximal strength is our body's ability to produce force against a source of resistance. That can be our own body, it can be gravity, it can be the body of an opponent. Likewise, there is psychological benefit to being stronger. When you're big and strong, you tend to play with more confidence and more aggression. That's just an obvious thing to say. And lastly, there is a relationship between 1RM strength and general robustness to all sources of injuries. And when availability is the best ability, that is a good thing to have. The problem is, once you're on the field and you're available, you do need to concern yourself with your outputs in on-field movements like sprinting, jumping, changing direction, and hitting. And what we see in the real world and in research is that maximal strength in barbell lifts like the squat, the deadlift, the bench press, and so on are actually quite poor predictors of your outputs in these movements, and that is where we make our money as rugby players. And if we dig a level deeper and look at the context in which we're producing force on the field compared to the gym, it should be fairly obvious why strength is such a poor predictor. So if we imagine a barbell lift like a squat or a deadlift, there's no time limit as to how long it takes me to complete that exercise. I either lift it or I don't. And what we see from research is that it takes anywhere from half a second to a full second to produce the maximum amount of force that I have and lift that load or not lift that load. Contrast this to on-field movement, where there is an inherent time limit to almost everything that we do on the field of play. Male, female, high level, low level, old or young. We have a limited amount of time to produce force and create the movement that is going to make the difference. So for example, a long contact time with the ground is considered around 250 milliseconds. At the extreme end, top end sprinting can be 100 milliseconds or less. So we actually have a fraction of the time available to produce force. And that's why it's not always the strongest athletes that perform the best in on-field movements. Rather, it's going to be those athletes that can produce the most amount of force in the time that they have available. And when we talk about maximizing force in the time that we have available, really, we're just talking about power. So it isn't necessarily strength that's the name of the game, but power. Now, there are a couple of exceptions to this, most notably scrummaging and mauling, where the contact times, the time available to produce force, is significantly longer. And you may be tempted to think that if you're a tight 5 forward, which is the positions that tend to perform most in these actions, that you can just concentrate on strength and you'll be okay. I would not fall into that trap because these actually represent a tiny proportion of match activity, and the rest of the time you're having to sprint, change direction, jump and hit with all of the other positions. And that can represent a significant injury risk or energy cost before you get to the scrummaging and mauling. So really, power training has to be a concern for all positions. And it isn't just the time available that limits the transfer of 1RM barbell lifts in the gym to on-field movements. There are a whole host of other criteria that we have to consider. For example, the planes of motion. We don't just work in straight lines up and down the field, we have to move laterally and we have to move rotationally also. We have to consider the speed that the segments of the body are moving at. We have to consider the degree of muscular stretch, the utilization of the stretch shortening cycle that is occurring, and the direction in which the force is being applied. Is it just straight up and down, or are we applying force horizontally also? So if you've been training for any appreciable amount of time, let's say up to a 1.5 times bodyweight squat, which is not that difficult to do, you're actually going to see little to no transfer from further increases in maximal strength to on-field movement. Think of it like a tube of toothpaste. So when the tube of toothpaste is new, you take the cap off, you can just push as light as you want in any direction, and toothpaste is going to come flying out of the end. The older that tube of toothpaste is, the more precise the direction you have to push with more force to get the same amount of toothpaste to come out the end. That's a useful analogy for the transfer of training. When you're first starting out, strength does help, but after a while, you're going to have to train in a progressively more specific manner, i.e. in movements that look and share the same characteristics as on-field movement to see improvement on the field. And that is why a traditional strength-based program is not the only answer, and we have to train power. Now, this is going to be news to many, but I'm sure there are some athletes out there, it's not news. They know that they need to train power. However, the vast majority of athletes still struggle with their understanding and implementation of power training. It tends to be much worse than strength training, and strength is not that good to begin with. What typically happens is athletes who understand that they need to train power are then going to scour the internet and look at a prominent athlete's Instagram or a professional athlete training on YouTube, and they're just going to pick one or two exercises without the context and understanding of how this training has to be progressed. So typically what happens is you're going to end up with a power training program that is way too intense, way too much volume, way too much complexity, way too early in the training with not enough progression on the back end. Now, a lot of the time, this is like trying to swat a housefly with a hand grenade. You're going to kill the fly, but you're going to blow up the house in the process, that being your joints. Another major error that athletes fall into is believing that they have to learn, practice, and implement the full Olympic lifts, as that is the only route to power development. And typically what happens is you spend weeks or months practicing the lifts with a broomstick with little to no load to end up with form that still isn't that great, when in reality you could have used all of that time to load up a much simpler exercise way earlier on and get more adaptation sooner. Now, all of these reasons are why I developed the original Rugby Strength Coach power template back in the day. It's been picked up by hundreds of athletes from all over the world. It's probably been used by thousands. But following on from the success of the Speed Template 2.0 that we released in late 2020, I thought it was time to do the same for the Power Template and update it, make it bigger, better, and more user-friendly to reflect the learning that I've undergone in the last 5 years and hopefully deliver an even better product to you guys. Most notably is going to be a more balanced but a more aggressive progression of the 3-step progression that I use for power training means, most notably jumps, plyometrics, medicine ball throws, and ballistic power movements. The idea behind this being that we want to get more results sooner, but do so in a safe manner. And the deviation from such a position-specific approach to a more balanced approach is to ensure that all athletes, regardless of position, are well prepared for the chaotic demands of rugby, and that they're able to develop explosive strength in all planes of motion, in all joint ranges, and in a variety of different movement patterns. So we're really looking to develop 3-dimensional athletes with this template. And just like the Speed Template 2.0, we've made this template much more user-friendly than before. So the original Power Template was 3 days a week for 8 weeks, one size fits all. In the Power Template 2.0, you're going to be able to choose from 2, 3, or 4 days of training per week with preps of 4, 8, 12, or 16 weeks. So no matter what your weekly schedule is, no matter what your competition calendar is, you're going to find a variation of this template to fit your situation. With over 5,000 words of supporting notes that come with this template, you're also going to get a much more deeper insight into the scientific rationale and the practical considerations of implementing power training for rugby. And that includes information on exercise selection, modifying around injury, fatigue, equipment, logistical concerns, and how to select and schedule power testing throughout the year. As with all of our templates, this is going to be a PDF download that you can take with you on your phone when you train. If you're unsure about any of the exercises, all you have to do is click on the link and it will open up a video demonstration. If any aspect of the template is still not clear after that, you can click on a link to email us directly, ask us a question, and we'll get right back to you. Similarly, we have a money-back guarantee on the Power Template 2.0. If you buy it, download it, try it, and you don't like it, you don't feel that the level of information on offer was good enough, or that the results that you got from the training were not up to scratch, we will refund 100% of your money, no questions asked. We're that confident in it. Now, normally at this stage of the video, I give you a code and say if you're among the first 100 buyers, you get a discount. Unfortunately, this thing is sold so fast to our email list that those coupon codes have already gone. But if you would like to pick up a copy of the Rugby Strength Coach Power Template 2.0, all you have to do is click on the link below and you can get a hold of a copy.